we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, wherever you're watching, please like the podcast. Please share it. Please give us a 5-star rating. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and share and subscribe to our channel and all that great stuff. And I know a lot of people are actually watching on YouTube, and I really appreciate it. But if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Music, follow along on there as well. If you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, feel free. Check us out on our Twitter at the Bigmark Pod or on our Instagram at the Bigmark Podcast. DM us there. Feel free, with any ideas for the show or any things you want to just let me know. Feel free. And like I always say, I want to build the community. I want to build the Bigmark Community Podcast. The people who listen, the community of listeners out there. And, again, I appreciate every one of you. You could have been anywhere doing anything, and I appreciate you taking the time. If you do like the podcast, please tell your friends. Even if you told one person, we can double the podcast overnight. So, again, thank you so much for listening. If you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Today's a special episode for me. It's we talk a lot about movies and TV on the Bigmark podcast, and obviously I love both. And there's a lot of really special TV shows that I've been able to chat about and have a lot of fun chatting about. But this one's really special, the Trailer Park Boys. If you've never heard of the Trailer Park Boys, how could I describe it? Well, I guess that's what we're here to do tonight. But, the idea of so truly by definition it's a mockumentary. Slowly but surely, as the seasons went on, they kind of got a little bit away from that, but they never really stopped kind of making a nod to the fact that it was a documentary and that there was some semblance of trying to keep it real. The first few seasons, definitely a little bit more so than others. But, the whole idea was that, it was surrounding 3 Canadian buddies. Actually, I just started watching the series again recently. And the first few episodes, it really surrounds Ricky and Julian. And again, if you've never seen the Trailer Park Boys, the 3 stars are Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles, played by Rob Wells, John Paul Tremblay, and Mike Smith, respectively. And they are the Trailer Park Boys. They become like the 3 main stars of the show, and everything kind of surrounds them and their interactions with the other characters on the show. And they're really good friends in real life, the actors, and then they're really good friends on the show. And it's really, again, there's something so inherently Canadiana about it. It's wonderfully East Coast. They say the trailer park, Sunnyvale Trailer Park, where the fictional trailer park where it is set, the show is set, is 3 hours outside of Moncton. So presumably in Nova Scotia. No. Oh my God, this is bad. I don't know my geography. Oh my God, Moncton, New Brunswick. Wow. I'm sorry, everybody from the East Coast. I should go down for that. But if it's 3 hours from Moncton, it could possibly be in Nova Scotia. Fuck me. I suck. Sorry, boys. But inherently it's East Coast, and, in watching some of the DVDs and all the extra special commentary and things like that, I know that they filmed it all over the East Coast and different trailer parks on location in some places. And I know in the later seasons that when they're growing a bunch of dope in the fields, those fields are actually hemp fields, and they're somewhere in Ontario. I remember hearing that. But again, the existence of these three dudes and the show that follows is just like, yes, there is an exaggerated aspect to things, but honestly, like, it's really not far off, and there are people out there that are truly like that, and it's like, it's so wild, and it's an interesting thing. And the really, really wild thing about the Trailer Park Boys is that, you know, when it started and where it is, you know, 12 seasons spent on the air, and a bunch of them were like in the Netflix era and kind of things. But it first aired April 22nd, 2001. And the interesting thing about it is it started when television was television. When it was on Showcase. It came after Kenny versus Penny. I remember that's the first time I ever watched it. It was like, you know, classic television. Once a week a show would drop, like a new episode, and you'd get to know it. But that was the thing, is that it came out in an era. So again, 2001, it came out in this era where, you know, people didn't really know what was happening. Like, my mom literally thought it was still a documentary. Like, she legitimately thought it was a real documentary when it first came on. And like, again, I think there was somewhat of a concerted effort to actually pretend like it was. And like, when you watch it, you're like, is this real? And, you know, there's times where they broke the fourth wall and the camera guy would trip over, and, you know, there was like interview type scenarios, right? It was like kind of like, you know, the way like The Office would be set up or something like that. And it's really interesting where the show started and where the show finished. So again, the way I look at the show, and what I'm mostly going to be talking about today, is the first 7 seasons. So season 1 through 7. And the reason why is because what actually happened is in 2008, when they reached their 7th season, the show was like, we're done. It's over. Like, they called it quits. They did their thing. They had their fun in the sun. And I think it wasn't really commercially viable for them, but Mike Clattenburg, who was the director, who was like the major brains behind the operation, one of the big reasons why it had that really real feeling, he was the person who drove that. He left after the 7th season, and the show was big. The show was popular. Like, I mean, I watched it. I loved it. But it wasn't, I don't think, again, it was making the boys a lot of money. And that's the weird thing. And I think because it was only popular in Canada, you know, sadly, you can't make a lot of money that way. I guess it was only on Showcase. I don't know how much money you actually like receive from Showcase for doing all that stuff. But, you know, they did a Christmas special, and then they did a like extra little thing after season 7 was finished. It was like short film or like special TV special, not Christmas special, but it was like a super episode kind of thing, which was phenomenal. Tragically hip cameos, just amazing. Actually, one of the early episodes, I believe I'm into the 2nd season now. But Elliot Page is in some of the episodes. Like, again, just like distinct Canadian, and it always talks different things. You know, it has different products. And, you know, sometimes you can't even really tell what the product actually is, but maybe you kind of can. Like, that was one of the cool things that Clattenburg would do, is he would like blur out something random in the scene and just make it look like, oh, they're not supposed to be showing that. And again, that just like, it kept, you know, everything was really rooted in reality, which I think was the linchpin of the show. That it was meant to be believable, even though things were pretty ridiculous on when you take a step back. You know, you got to know these characters, and what they did wasn't surprising to you. But again, you know, the big themes, and I think I have a poster, and there's like little symbols at the bottom, kind of like almost like Led Zeppelin symbols. And it's like a gun and like a pot leaf and like a glass of liquor. And it's just like, you know, the show is like drinking, smoking dope, doing drugs. And it's like, this is the show I watched during high school, right? Like, you know, it was up until 2008, which is, you know, right before I graduated. Season 7, I should say, because I think it picked up in like 2012 or 2010 or something like that. Like, it was several years after where they picked up, and I think Netflix bought them, and they continued doing seasons. And like I said, I didn't want to get too far into that today, but you know, the show really changes. But again, those first 7 seasons where, you know, and the way it kind of like shakes out, and you know, the first few seasons aren't really serial. Like, they don't necessarily have an arc. They don't really, like, you know, completely have a story from front to back. But you know, I think one of the special things about the show is that with that format where you're kind of just like, you know, getting used to the characters and getting to know them a little bit more and watching them do just like crazy scenarios and not necessarily worrying about, you know, how things line up chronologically and things like that, you get to know these characters a little bit more. And again, I think as much as the show is rooted in reality, what you love is the personality of all these other characters, because it has a great supporting cast. You know, one of the best other actors, one of the best other characters, played by Jonathan Torrens, is J-Rock. He's hilarious. You know, he's a white guy that thinks he's black, and he truly thinks he's black. Like, that's the thing in the show. And, you know, he's hilarious. He's cool. He's funny. It's just like, oh my God. J-Rock is the man. Sam Losco, who is just a caveman of a guy. And in the later seasons, you know, things kind of take kind of like a weird turn with him. But he like starts out as like a vet, and like slowly, because he's a little bit like the Rickety Cricket from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's like the Rickety Cricket of Trailer Park Boys, where slowly through the course of the show, he kind of degenerates into like a complete fucking caveman. It's hilarious. Phil Collins, aka Philadelphia Collins, he's the man, R.I.P., the actor that actually played him. He was a whale of a man and absolutely hilarious in the show, and just a great, you know, pincushion to make fun of and poke at. Ray, obviously, Ricky's dad, played by Barry Dunn, who I think is actually one of the producers of the show, but just absolutely hilarious character, you know, constantly trying to dip out the government and pretending being greasy. And again, just like a cool, there's the element of Ricky and his father, and like and they're dealing with that, and he's trying to be, you know, a father to his daughter. Ricky's trying to be a father to his daughter Trinity. And again, there is that interesting dynamic. And of course, you have Leahy and Randy, played by John Dunsworth and Pat Roach, and they're special. Like, honestly, they would tour around. I never really got a chance to like get to know them or like meet them or like go to any of the shows, but they would have these shows in London or everywhere where they would go and just like go to the bar, and you could go and meet Leahy and Randy. And I never really got there. I saw the live show. They did a live show, the Trailer Park Boys. And I was really it was really interesting seeing that, and it's what the hell's going on here? I'm just looking at my wonderfully documented notes here. Interesting. Anyway, like the Trailer Park Boys did a live show, like Ricky, Julian, Bubbles did a live show, and Leahy and Randy would show up for that. So I got to see them like in person, on stage, which I thought was really interesting. And maybe I'll go into a little bit in a second, but just Leahy and Randy became this absolute wild duo of like, they played essentially the villains on the show, but John Dunsworth, R.I.P. as well, is one of the best drunk actors of all time. Honestly, playing a drunk and like a believable drunk is absolutely wild. And actually in one of the seasons, I believe it's in the season 6, 6, I believe, Leahy actually pretends to be drunk in the show. Like, he's not drinking in the show. His character, Jim Leahy, is not drinking in the show. And he goes on this whole scheme and pretends that he's drunk in the show. So he's acting that he's pretending to be drunk in the show. He's acting whilst acting that he's drunk. And like he seems like he's legitimately wasted. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, it seems like he drank fucking mad bottles and was just unreal. And I think that takes like pure skill to not make it seem like you're just like, oh, look at me. Woo, I'm drunk. Woo. Like, he just was masterful at it. Honestly, maybe near the later seasons, he kind of had to push it to a limit that seemed a little extreme, but like in the first 7 seasons, man, he was just absolutely amazing as a drunk lunatic trailer park supervisor. Jim Leahy and Randy Bobandy. Randy Bobandy obviously being Leahy's trailer park supervisor assistant. He's just a tub of a man and just a plug and just a great straight man to riff off of. And again, I think that was the cool thing about the show, is that they really created these relationships with the characters that, yeah, they ripped on Leahy and Randy, but like, because they're all in the trailer park together, at the end of the day, they, had a soft spot for each other or something like that, even though that they were constantly at odds or doing shit, that was trying to fucking one up, or not even, just like Leahy and Randy were trying to always get Ricky, Bubbles, and Julian sent to jail. So they're always just fighting. And again, just a really interesting dynamic where they set up these other characters too, like Corey and Trevor, another great duo. They're kind of like the sidekicks of the boys, and they're like kind of the piss-ons. And at one point they like take off in the show, and there was probably some turmoil with the actors and things like that, but it's just like superficial in the sense that it's just like a bunch of fucking buffoonery, people getting drunk and stuff, but layered in the sense that there's these interpersonal relationships, especially in like small town, small community vibrations, where you kind of get stuck with these certain people and you have to just kind of deal with them, and you can't just tell them to fuck off. But eventually, in certain circumstances, they move away, they go away. Like Ricky was in one of the early episodes, was like, fucking, I'm moving to Toronto, man. Like, I'm getting out of here. And I think that's funny, because it's kind of like one of those things where some people do have to split their little town and get out of their environment, or the reverse of that too, where someone has left and come back, then all of a sudden now they're the big fish in the little pond, and ooh, you were the big city boy and went away, and now you're coming back with all this. And I think all that gets played, and also Julian, I think, really, really represents that whole idea of like, he's got bigger plans, bigger feelings. He feels bigger than the trailer park, but yet is so tied to it because he's steeped himself in the community and is so important to the rest of the community that if he left, it would cause such a rift. Lucy and Sarah, of course, too, the whole relationship of Lucy and Ricky and their back and forth and their daughter Trinity. And it's just such a funny and classic take of just that yo-yo type relationship where, they're constantly breaking up and getting back together, and Ricky's trying to bend over backwards just to get with Lucy, and at one point, they're on the outs, and then all of a sudden she gets breast implants, and then all of a sudden he's in love with her out of nowhere again. And again, the whole show is like Julian, Ricky, and Bubbles are like constantly going back and forth to jail. So then Lucy's always like breaking up with Ricky when he is in jail, and then when he comes back, they get back together. And again, there's so many, it becomes tropes. And I think that's the thing why I love the fact that it was almost done at season 7. I think it really should have been done at season 7, in the fact that they just got so much done in those seasons. Like season 4, amazing arc. It's like probably my favorite season. I've said this before. Season 4s of many shows tend to be the best season. I don't know what it is. Honestly, I don't know if it's you've got a few seasons under the belt already, and then maybe you've signed some extensions that you have 2 or 3 more seasons to burn before it's over, and you feel comfortable and you feel like maybe you can take some more liberties, or you've gotten to know the character, like the writers have gotten to know the characters a little bit more. Because I saw this really interesting clip with David Chase, the guy who created The Sopranos, and he was talking about that the actors actually that play the characters start to tell you a little bit more. They get to know the characters themselves, and they start making choices, or they start, contributing ideas to what that character actually is going to become. So things start to change, right? So maybe some of that was happening. And again, the boys were writing and creating the show, as they were playing the actors as they were playing the characters and doing all that stuff. So things evolve. But again, season 4, amazing, great storyline, really iconic episodes in that one. Green Bastard, propane, the whole dope fields, and just Leahy on an absolute tear in that season. I think Rizub and Tizug is in that season too, where the boys create a rub and tug. Just again, one of my favorite seasons, has a great finale as well. Rita McNeil is involved, and just fantastic. Season 7 again, also a great season with an arc where, like I said, a lot of the other seasons apart from 4 tend to have they don't have like that serial aspect to it, where it's not one after, it's just kind of like, one-offs. And again, I think they really should have stopped there. I think Clattenburg, knew that it was done, and felt that either he felt like he had to do more, move on to other projects. And it's a shame, because I think what happened was, it was popular in Canada. Like I said, the live show was happening. Everyone loved it. Everyone knew about it. That was Canadian. But I think the problem was it didn't get down to the States, and that's unfortunately where you make all the money. So I think what happened was, once it went off the air and then Netflix started coming around, I think Netflix got a hold of it, and then people started watching it and being like, wow, this show's amazing, we want more of it. And the boys were like, fuck it, let's get together and rip. Like, let's keep writing, because why not? So I respect that. I think that's awesome. Good for them for securing the bag, and also being able to continue to write and have fun with your friends and do great. In couple seasons I could take or leave. I think season 8 and 9 I wasn't a big fan of, but I think it was like 10 and 11. There's a couple where it was phenomenal. Oh my God. one of my favorite scenes of the entire series, to be truthfully honest, happens, I think, in one of the later seasons, I should say. I think season 11. No, maybe season 10, where Ricky just absolutely goes to town on this bathroom because he gets frustrated and is trying to fucking do a renovation and ends up destroying this bathroom. It's hilarious. Anyway, it's tough, but again, I respect it, and it's a show that is essentially Canadian. It's infinitely quotable. There's so many great lines. Like, I think people try to do the Bubbles impression a little bit too much, and there's words here and there that you can get away with. I think people try and go a little bit too hard on facial expressions and things like that. But again, it's things where, especially with my friends, like me and my friends have all watched that show a million times, and we just know, there's certain things that we know relate back to the show, and a lot of it's J-Rock, like Noam Sayans. When are you doing Noam Census? Like, that's one of the greatest lines where J-Rock says Noam Saying way too much, and his buddy T was like, "Yo, man, you're saying Noam Saying too many times." And then J-Rock says, "What do you counting my Noam Sayings for? You doing a Noam Census?" Ricky has this tendency of, they call them Rickyisms, and he says sayings that don't really make any sense, or like they're not actually the right sayings. Like, it's basically peach and cake instead of a piece of cake. It's water under a fridge. You know what? I'm going to look up a few because they're just phenomenal. And again, they're these things that it sounded like Rob Wells, the guy who plays Ricky, started doing, but it slowly kind of became a bit, which is so phenomenal. Here's one. Americans for Americans, tremendous. Bagminton, I love saying that one instead of badminton. He says bagminton. Be suave instead of be salve. Little bottle of joy instead of little bundle of joy. Oh my god, there's just like deerts instead of deer. That's a great one. Friends with Benedicts instead of friends with benefits. Flames were golfing up the roof, golfing up the walls instead of engulfed with flames. Like, bro, the guy was off his fucking rocker, man. Like, home trees instead of home free. Oh, it's so good. Fucking insurance instead of insurance. This is a very extensive list. My goodness. But again, these are the things that are infinitely quotable. And again, I'm talking essential Canadiana. Like, guys making craft dinner, eating fucking fried bologna sandwiches. Just the accents are amazing, everything. And it's just such a show that's so near and dear to my heart. And, as much as I love them, and, it's tough. I think they got to the point where they started making a cartoon of the show. And it's like, boys, I love you. But I think it's one of those things where it's an exercise in quitting while you're ahead. And that's a tough one. That's a really tough thing. It's a really tough idea, right? Like, I don't blame them. I understand the position that they were in, where all of a sudden they got popular and they had to take advantage of it. I totally understand that, and I respect that, and I hope they made that money. I really do. But the problem that I have with it is that there is a tipping point where you either, it's that classic Dark Knight quote, right? You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And you either die on top, you go out being the best show, or you live long enough to see yourself slowly fade away. Seinfeld did it. Um, you know, I guess who else would be a really good, like, I want to say there's some bands that happened to, unfortunately, but it was more due to like deaths in the band, like Zeppelin or like Nirvana. But you know, maybe even I guess not necessarily Breaking Bad, but Breaking Bad in the sense that they didn't keep pulling it out and dragging it out and getting to a point where it fucking sucked. But again, Seinfeld is always the fucking pinnacle. It's always the big, the biggest kind of example of just being like, this is it. Sopranos, in a sense, maybe, just because the way it ended, people were kind of like, what the fuck? But again, that whole idea that you just got to be like, I don't care that we're the top notch. I want to go out now, and will always be remembered for being the fucking best. There's no way you can say, oh, they started slowly falling off. Like, you can speculate that it could have even got better. But the idea that is you've completely ended it. It's done. What exists now is it exists, and it's out there in the universe. And I think that is essentially what makes some things beautiful. I think the idea that you can kind of put, you know, maybe you can put a cherry on, I don't know about a cherry, but you can put an idea on something where it's like, that's what we did. We did our best. We put it out there. We've completed the story. And I think that tight package that everyone can receive, I think is so important. And it's hard to do because it gets to that point where you have to then make a decision to walk away from something that's doing really well. So it's tough, and I respect it, and I love the show, and it's still so near and dear to my heart. I love the show. I always watch it when it's on, and I'm really excited to continue this rewatch of it. But who knows how it would exist now if it was just those fucking perfect first 7 seasons. Oh, amazing. Anyway, check the show out if you've never seen it. Thank you so much for watching. I love all y'all. Rate the podcast, follow along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Share the podcast. Tell your friends. Reach out to us on our DMs at the Bigmark Podcast, at the Bigmark Pod on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to donate to the pod, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/BigmarkPod. And again, thanks again for listening. I really appreciate it. You guys are the best. I do it for all y'all. Love y'all. Talk to you soon. Peace. Zip. Peace.